What if in the most critical moment of your life, help came from where you least expected? The ocean is a mystery. For some, a sanctuary of peace. For others, an unpredictable force. A place where nature sets the rules. Hayden Parker knew this world well. The ocean was his home. His temple. His daily challenge. But on a bright, sunny morning in California, he learned that no matter how experienced he was, he would never truly be in control. What was supposed to be another perfect day of surfing turned into a nightmare. A brutal attack. The overwhelming force of something unstoppable. The water stained red. The paralyzing fear. The end seemed inevitable. But in that instant, when it looked like there was no escape, something unexpected happened. Hayden was about to discover that the true heroes of the ocean don't always have a voice. But that doesn't mean they don't speak. The sun was still low on the horizon when Hayden Parker opened his eyes that morning. The scent of the ocean already filled the air, carried by the fresh breeze drifting in through the open window of his small apartment in Santa Cruz, California. He took a deep breath, feeling the comforting familiarity of that salty aroma. For him, the ocean was more than just a view. It was a home. A temple. A sanctuary. With years of experience in surfing, the water had become his second skin. Since childhood, he had felt an unbreakable connection with the sea. To him, every wave was a conversation. A silent challenge between man and nature. That morning, as he prepared his board, he felt a mix of excitement and serenity. The day promised great waves, and he wanted to make the most of every second. The drive to the beach was short. He kept the windows down, the wind tangling his sun-bleached hair, as his favorite song played softly on the radio. The streets were still empty, and the city seemed to be waking up slowly. As he parked, he spotted a few friends in the distance, already in the water, paddling toward the horizon. The sky was painted in shades of gold and orange, reflected on the ocean's surface. He stepped out of the car, grabbed his board, and felt the cool sand beneath his feet. Closing his eyes for a moment, he listened to the crash of the waves, to the distant cries of seagulls. The ocean was calling, as it always did. It was the perfect moment. The day was going to be unforgettable. He just didn't know. It would be for a completely unexpected reason. The ocean was calm, dancing in gentle waves that reflected the golden glow of the morning sun. The water was crystal clear, revealing the graceful movements of seaweed and tiny fish, drifting in sync with the ebb and flow of the tides. Hayden glided effortlessly across the ocean's surface, moving with the ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. He had already caught a few perfect waves, felt the adrenaline, the freedom that only surfing could provide. The salty breeze cooled his face, as he let himself float for a moment, surrendering to the gentle rocking of the water. He glanced toward the shore, noticing a few beachgoers arriving, his friends still surfing in the distance. It was one of those days he wished he could bottle up and keep forever. No rush. No obligations. Just the pure sensation of being connected to the ocean. He looked up at the sky, noticing that the weather was still perfect. No clouds. No sign of any sudden change. Maybe it was time to head back. He felt satisfied, recharged. With one last glance at the horizon, Hayden turned his board and began paddling back. That's when he felt it. Something different. Something that shattered the absolute tranquility of the morning. The silence of the ocean was shattered by a brutal impact. Without warning, something colossal erupted from the depths, striking Hayden with overwhelming force. The world around him spun into a whirlwind of foam and disorientation. His board slipped from his hands, and a ferocious pull yanked him downward. The water around him turned red. His chest tightened with panic. Instinct screamed at him to swim up. But the invisible weight held him down. Something smooth and relentless brushed past him. Fast. Precise. A searing pain tore through his leg. The warmth of his blood dissolving into the cold water. With a desperate effort, Hayden kicked upward, breaking through the surface with a gasping breath. His body trembled. His breathing erratic. His senses struggling to process what had just happened. Then, he saw it. His board floated a few meters away. But beyond it, something that froze his heart. A triangular fin sliced through the water. The great white shark circled. Its sleek, massive body gliding just beneath the surface. Its black, lifeless eyes locked onto him. Calculating. No rush. No hesitation. A cold dread crawled through Hayden's veins. Like an electric shock. Every second stretched into eternity. He tried to move. But his body was weak. His leg throbbing in pain. He glanced toward the shore. Too far. His friends, in the distance, had finally realized the danger. Their shouts reached him before their expressions did. Pure horror frozen on their faces. But what could they do? They were too far away. Helpless against the ocean's greatest predator. Then, the shark dove. Hayden's instinct screamed. He knew what that meant. The predator was preparing for the final strike. His time was running out. Silence fell beneath the water. Hayden knew the predator was close. Preparing to strike. His heart pounded in his chest. His wounded leg throbbed. And every movement felt like an immense effort. The shore. His friends. Any hope of help. Too far away. Then, out of nowhere, something broke the surface. A wave of energy cut through the water around him. Shadows darted beneath the ocean. Moving with stunning agility. First one. Then another. And then several. Hayden barely had time to process what he was seeing. Dolphins. A pod of them appeared. Swimming at high speed. And within seconds, they had formed a circle around him. The shark, which had been closing in with surgical precision, hesitated. What had been a solitary, defenseless prey, was now protected by creatures known for challenging the ocean's predators. The dolphins cut through the water in perfect synchrony. Moving like a living shield. They slapped their tails against the surface, creating waves and bubbles. A confusing barrier for any hunter. Hayden, still dazed, realized what was happening. These animals weren't here by accident. They had sensed the danger. And somehow, they had chosen to act. Even with no strength left. He knew he was witnessing something extraordinary. The dolphins circled him. Alert. Agile. Ready to repel any attack. The shark didn't retreat immediately. It continued circling. Assessing the situation. Its massive body gliding just below the surface. But then, something changed. The shark's movements, once calculated and confident, now wavered. It realized it was no longer the dominant hunter here. And then, with one final flick of its tail, it dived into the depths, vanishing into the endless blue. Hayden still struggled to grasp what had just happened. The fear, the pain, the adrenaline, all still raced through his body. But above all, he felt something new. Hope. The dolphins remained. As if waiting for him to move. As if they needed to make sure he could get out of there alive. This was his chance. He needed to swim.
What do you think of the story so far? Did the dolphins manage to help Hayden against the shark attack? Keep following us to find out more. But first, it's important that you like the video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to hear more stories like this.
Time seemed to move strangely, as if each second stretched endlessly. Hayden knew he had to swim. But his body screamed in pain. His leg throbbed. Adrenaline rushed through his veins. But exhaustion threatened to consume him. The dolphins didn't back down. Like a disciplined army. They held their formation around him, shielding his every move. He watched as one of the dolphins spun sharply, slapping its tail against the water's surface with force. The sound echoed. Like a warning. An invisible barrier keeping the shark at bay. Struggling for air. Hayden gathered the last of his strength and began to swim. Each stroke was an immense effort. And the pain in his leg made him stumble. But he had to keep going. The shore still seemed so far away. But now, he wasn't alone. At the edge of the sand, his friends ran along the coast, frantically waving. Without hesitation, two of them dove in, swimming toward him. They shouted his name. But the roar of the ocean, and his own exhaustion, made it hard to distinguish their words. None of it mattered. The only thing that did was keeping himself moving. Getting closer. Getting out. The shark still circled. A dark shadow, lurking just beneath the surface. It hadn't left. It was watching. Calculating. Hayden knew that if he hesitated, it might be too late. But the dolphins stood firm. Every time the predator tried to approach, the pod surged forward, intercepting its path, creating an impenetrable blockade. They were like guardians, sentinels of the ocean, refusing to let him be taken. The shore was getting closer. Hayden could see the worried faces of those on land. He could hear fragments of anxious voices. Every meter he advanced, safety felt more real, more within reach. His friends were almost there. Arms outstretched, ready to pull him into shallow waters. Then, with one final push, Hayden felt the firm grip of his friend's hand on his arm. He was dragged forward, the waves crashing behind him, propelling him toward the shore. His exhausted body finally collapsed into relief. He was out of danger. Lying on the sand, struggling to catch his breath, he lifted his gaze to the ocean. The sun reflected off the rippling surface. And for a moment, he saw them. The dolphins were still there. For a few more seconds, they swam together, as if making sure their protected one was safe. Then, one by one, they dived into the depths, vanishing into the infinite blue of the ocean. The cold sand against his skin was a shock of reality. Hayden lay on his back, gasping for air, feeling each heartbeat like a drum inside his chest. His muscles trembled, exhausted. The pain in his leg throbbed, like an open wound. The sound of the ocean, once an invitation to surf and freedom, now felt like a distant roar. A reminder of what had just happened. The voices around him were filled with concern. Friends and strangers rushed to his side, their faces marked by tension and relief. Someone knelt beside him, asking if he was okay. He didn't answer right away, still trying to process everything. The attack, The shark. The crushing fear of death. And, above all, the unexpected arrival of the dolphins. Taking a deep breath, Hayden lifted his head with difficulty and looked toward the ocean. The morning's golden reflections still danced over the waves. And there, just beyond the break, he saw them. The graceful forms of the dolphins. Still there. Still swimming together. As if they were silent guardians. Ensuring he was truly safe. Waiting only for the right moment to leave. And then, almost like a farewell, the dolphins dove. One by one. Disappearing into the endless blue. Hayden closed his eyes for a moment. Feeling a wave of gratitude swell in his chest. The ocean, which had almost taken his life, had also saved him. And no matter how hard he tried to rationalize it, he knew. What happened that day was more than just chance. The shark was gone. Returned to its deep-sea kingdom. And he had survived. But something inside him had changed forever. Hayden's recovery was long. The wound on his leg required weeks of rest and physical therapy. But the greatest battle wasn't physical. The ocean, his home for so many years, now carried a different weight. Every time he closed his eyes, he relived the violent impact. The red liquid spreading through the water. The fin slicing the surface. And then, the dolphins. The last thing he saw before reaching the shore. The memory haunted him. But it also fascinated him. Why? What made them act? The day he finally decided to return to the water. The hesitation was still there. He walked along the sand. As he had done so many times before. But this time, his steps were slower. His friends were there. Watching from a distance. Ready to support him if needed. He gripped his board firmly. Feeling his heart race. As the waves approached. As he stepped into the water. Each wave against his body felt both familiar and foreign. He paddled slowly. Feeling the resistance of the board gliding over the surface. The fear was still there. But something inside him pushed him forward. And then, it happened. Fast movements appeared around him. Agile shadows cut through the water. He felt a presence. And when he looked to the side, they were there. The dolphins. Were they the same ones? He would never be sure. But what mattered was the connection he felt. They swam close. Matching his movements. As if they were guiding him. As if they knew. That this moment meant more than just returning to surfing. It meant a rebirth. For the first time since the attack. Hayden smiled in the water. The adrenaline he felt wasn't fear. It was freedom. With a firm push. He caught his first wave since that day. And as he glided along the shimmering crest, the dolphins leaped beside him. Celebrating the return of the man they had once saved. He would never see the ocean the same way again. But in that moment, he knew. He was exactly where he was meant to be. From that day forward. Every wave he rode. Every dive he took. Would be seen with new eyes. The ocean was no longer just a place of adventure. It was a place of mystery. Of respect. Of life in its purest and most unpredictable form. And on that day, he learned that sometimes the true heroes don't walk on two legs. Hayden's story wasn't just about an attack and a miraculous rescue. It was about transformation. About the thin line between fear and courage. About the invisible connection that binds all creatures of the ocean. Before that day, the sea was an adventure for him. A playground of challenges and victories. But after the attack, he began to see it differently. The ocean wasn't just a backdrop for his maneuvers on the waves. It was a living, breathing universe. A force of unpredictable nature. And in the midst of that universe were the dolphins. What made them help him? Instinct? Intelligence? Something beyond our understanding? Hayden would never have a definite answer. But deep down, he knew. What happened that day was real. As real as the pain he felt. As real as the fear that consumed him. They were there. They protected him. And somehow, in that moment, the dolphins chose to save him. Since that day, every time he returned to the ocean, he felt something different. More respect. More gratitude. A deeper awareness. That in the vastness of the sea, he was not its master. He was merely a visitor. The attack could have driven him away from the water forever. But instead, he chose to return. He chose to face his fears. To find new meaning in what he loved. He chose to trust the ocean again. And, more than anything, he chose never to forget that on that day, at the most critical moment of his life, help came from where he least expected it. Sometimes, the real heroes don't have a voice. But that doesn't mean they don't speak.
What an incredible story, isn't it? If you liked it, like the video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to hear more stories like this.